Herodotus, often hailed as the father of history, was a Greek historian who lived during the 5th century BCE. His monumental work, Histories, is not just a detailed account of the Greco-Persian Wars, but also a rich tapestry of stories, myths, and anecdotes from all over the ancient world. His work provides a fascinating window into the customs, beliefs, and cultures of different civilizations of his time. Below, I'll recount some of the most curious and entertaining stories from Herodotus' Histories, exploring both the bizarre and the enlightening aspects of his accounts. 1. The Amazons, warrior women of the steppe. Herodotus speaks of the legendary Amazons, a tribe of fierce warrior women who lived on the fringes of the Greek world. According to his account, after the Greeks defeated the Amazons in battle, they captured many of them and loaded them onto ships. However, these warrior women did not submit easily. They rose up, killed their captors, and took control of the ships, though they had no experience with seafaring. They eventually ran aground near the lands of the Scythians, a nomadic people of the steppe. The Scythians, intrigued by these strong women, decided to integrate with them. After some initial conflicts, they reached a compromise. The Scythian men would marry the Amazons, but only if they agreed to abandon their nomadic lifestyle and live as equals. Herodotus claims that these unions led to the formation of a new tribe, the Saurimati, who combined the cultures of the Scythians and Amazons. 2. The gold-digging ants of India. One of Herodotus' most fantastic stories comes from India, where he describes enormous ants, larger than a fox but smaller than a dog, that dug up gold dust while building their nests. According to Herodotus, the people of the region would use camels to outpace the ants and snatch up the gold, racing against time before the creatures could attack. While this story seems incredible, some modern scholars speculate that Herodotus might have been referring to the large marmots found in certain parts of the Indian subcontinent. These marmots are known for digging in the sandy soil where gold dust is present, and the story may have been exaggerated over time into the myth of the gold-digging ants. 3. The Egyptian reverence for cats. Herodotus gives a detailed account of the Egyptians' deep reverence for cats, describing a peculiar custom during times of house fires. When a fire broke out, Egyptians were more concerned with rescuing the cats than their homes or belongings. Cats were seen as sacred animals, often associated with the goddess Bastet, and their safety was paramount. Herodotus recounts an instance where a Persian invader used this reverence to his advantage. Knowing the Egyptians' love for cats, the Persian king Cambyses ordered his soldiers to capture as many cats as they could. The Persians then released the cats in front of the Egyptian army. The Egyptians, unwilling to harm the sacred animals, surrendered rather than risk hurting the cats during battle. 4. The Lydian game of dice to survive famine. Herodotus describes the ingenuity of the Lydians, an ancient people from Asia Minor, in dealing with a prolonged famine. According to him, the Lydians devised a unique solution. They invented dice games to distract themselves from the pangs of hunger. On one day, the Lydians would play dice and forget about eating. On the next day, they would eat but abstain from games. This cycle allowed them to endure for 18 years until they finally decided that half of the population would leave in search of new lands. This group, led by Tyrrhenus, eventually settled in what became known as Italy, giving rise to the Tyrrhenians, Etruscans. This story highlights how Herodotus often combined historical events with fascinating and imaginative details. 5. The fabulous wealth of King Croesus. Croesus, the king of Lydia, is famous in history for his immense wealth. Herodotus describes how Croesus, thinking himself the happiest of all men, asked the Greek philosopher Solon for confirmation. Solon, however, was unimpressed by Croesus' riches and warned him that true happiness could only be judged at the end of a man's life. This story takes a dramatic turn when Croesus, after being defeated and captured by the Persian king Cyrus, is placed on a pyre to be burned alive. As the flames began to rise, Croesus remembered Solon's words and cried out his name. Cyrus, curious about this outburst, spared Croesus and asked him to explain. When Croesus recounted Solon's teachings about the uncertainty of fortune, Cyrus was moved and made Croesus an advisor in his court, recognizing the truth of Solon's wisdom. 6. The mysterious death of Cambyses' Apis bull. Herodotus devotes significant attention to the eccentric behavior of Cambyses, the son of Cyrus the Great and king of Persia. One of the most curious tales involves Cambyses' actions in Egypt, where he showed great disrespect for local customs. According to Herodotus, Cambyses ordered the killing of the sacred Apis bull, a religious symbol in Egypt. This act was seen as an unforgivable crime by the Egyptians, as the Apis bull was associated with fertility and was worshipped as an incarnation of the god Ptah. Herodotus describes Cambyses as gradually descending into madness, committing increasingly erratic acts, including the killing of his own brother. The historian blames this madness on Cambyses' sacrilegious actions, believing that the gods were punishing him for his impiety. 7. The tale of Gyges and the magic ring. One of the most captivating stories in Herodotus' histories is the rise of Gyges, who became the king of Lydia. The tale begins with Gyges serving as a bodyguard to King Candaus. Candaus, proud of his wife's beauty, insisted that Gyges spy on her while she was undressing to confirm her beauty. Reluctantly, Gyges obeyed, but the queen noticed him and was furious. The queen, humiliated by her husband's actions, gave Gyges an ultimatum: kill Candaus and take the throne, or face death himself. Gyges chose to assassinate the king, and thus he became the ruler of Lydia. This tale also influenced Plato, who incorporated the story of Gyges' ring of invisibility into his philosophical discussions about power and morality in the Republic. 8. The strange beasts of Libya. Herodotus frequently discusses the wonders of distant lands, and his descriptions of the fauna of Libya are particularly curious. According to Herodotus, Libya was home to strange and exotic creatures, including enormous serpents and giant ostriches. He also recounts a story about a tribe called the Garamantes, who lived deep in the desert and chased after wild animals with chariots pulled by 4 horses. While many of Herodotus' descriptions of African wildlife are exaggerated or incorrect, they reflect the ancient Greeks' fascination with the unknown and the exotic. The historian's accounts of distant lands often blend fact with fiction, creating a rich tapestry of fantastical tales. 9. The experiment of Psammetichus. In an attempt to discover the world's original language, the Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus conducted a peculiar experiment, as recorded by Herodotus. He ordered 2 newborn infants to be raised in isolation, without hearing any spoken language. Psammetichus believed that without any influence, the children would spontaneously speak the primordial language of humanity. After 2 years, the children reportedly uttered the word bekos, which Psammetichus was told was the Phrygian word for bread. The pharaoh concluded that Phrygian, not Egyptian, was the original language of mankind. This early experiment in linguistics is a fascinating, if dubious, example of ancient scientific inquiry. 10. The tale of the Pygmies. Herodotus provides an intriguing account of the Pygmies, a diminutive race of people living near the sources of the Nile. He claims that they were constantly at war with cranes, giant birds that would migrate to their lands. This story is one of the many examples of Herodotus' blend of myth and observation, as pygmy-like people appear in various ancient and medieval accounts from different parts of the world. While it is now understood that Herodotus' pygmies likely refer to groups of small-statured people living in Central Africa, his description of their epic battles with cranes seems to be a fusion of mythology and travelers' tales. 11. The tale of Arion and the dolphin. One of the more heartwarming stories in Herodotus' histories involves Arion, a famous musician from Corinth who was renowned for his skill on the lyre. According to Herodotus, Arion traveled to Italy and amassed a great fortune through his performances. On his way back to Corinth by ship, the sailors, tempted by his wealth, decided to throw him overboard and take his money. Arion, seeing no escape, asked only that he be allowed to play one last song on his lyre. The sailors granted his wish, and he sang a beautiful melody while standing on the deck. After finishing his song, Arion threw himself into the sea. But rather than drown, a dolphin, enchanted by his music, came to his rescue and carried him safely to shore. When he returned to Corinth, Arion told his story to the local ruler, who did not believe him at first. However, when the sailors eventually arrived, they were confronted with Arion and confessed to their crime. This tale, often dismissed as a legend, highlights how Herodotus combined historical figures with fantastical events, capturing the imagination of his readers. 12. The flying snakes of Arabia. In his exploration of distant lands, Herodotus describes many bizarre creatures, but few are as strange as the flying snakes of Arabia. He claimed that these serpents, smaller than other snakes, had wings and lived in the Arabian desert. Each year, they would migrate across the desert, flying to Egypt to lay their eggs. The locals, fearing these creatures, had a unique way of dealing with them. According to Herodotus, the Arabian people would burn large amounts of frankincense to drive the snakes away, as the creatures were said to be repelled by the smoke. This story adds to the air of mystery surrounding Arabia in Herodotus' time, a place that was far from the familiar world of the Greeks and full of strange wonders. Although modern scholars doubt the existence of flying snakes, Herodotus' tale may have been inspired by sightings of certain species of birds or the vivid imaginations of travelers who had visited the region. Nonetheless, it remains one of the many strange natural histories recounted by Herodotus in his quest to document the world's wonders. 13. The indestructible feathers of the phoenix. Herodotus recounts a story about the phoenix, a mythical bird said to live in the deserts of Arabia. According to Herodotus, The phoenix is an extraordinary creature that appears only once every 500 years. When it reaches the end of its life, the phoenix builds a nest of fragrant spices, sets it on fire, and is consumed by the flames. From the ashes, a new phoenix is born, continuing the cycle of life and death. Herodotus adds a unique detail to this tale. When the phoenix dies, the young bird collects its predecessor's bones and carries them to the temple of the sun god in Heliopolis, Egypt, where it entombs the remains in a sacred shrine. The Greeks and Egyptians both revered the phoenix as a symbol of resurrection and renewal. This story is a perfect example of how Herodotus blended myth and history, incorporating elements of local traditions and religious beliefs into his narratives. While no such bird exists in nature, the myth of the phoenix has endured through the ages, symbolizing the cyclical nature of life and rebirth. 14. The river that turns objects to stone. Herodotus describes a mysterious river in the land of the Scythians, modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia, that had a peculiar property: it could turn objects to stone. According to Herodotus, this river, called the Hypanes, flowed through a region rich in salt. When people or animals touched the water, the salt would quickly crystallize on their skin, giving the appearance that they had turned to stone. Herodotus also claimed that the riverbanks were littered with petrified objects, from branches to animal bones. While this story may sound fantastical, there is likely some basis in reality. The river Herodotus described was likely rich in minerals that caused rapid crystallization on exposed surfaces, which could easily be interpreted as objects being turned to stone. This story illustrates Herodotus' tendency to report strange natural phenomena without fully understanding the scientific principles behind them, but it also shows his interest in the natural world and his desire to document the extraordinary. 15. The curious case of the Scythian skull rituals. The Scythians, a nomadic people of the Eurasian steppes, fascinated Herodotus, and he provides many accounts of their customs, some of which are particularly gruesome. One of the most curious traditions he describes involves their treatment of the heads of their enemies. According to Herodotus, after a successful battle, the Scythians would take the heads of their fallen enemies and perform a ritual in which they would remove the scalp and use it as a trophy. The Scythians would then fashion the skull into a drinking cup by covering it in gold or silver. Herodotus notes that the more enemies a man had killed, the more skulls he could display at banquets as a sign of his prowess. These skull cups were also used in religious rituals and ceremonies, as the Scythians believed they would gain the strength of their enemies by drinking from their skulls. While this story may seem shocking, it is consistent with other reports of warrior cultures that practiced headhunting and scalping. Herodotus' account provides a rare glimpse into the beliefs and customs of a distant and fearsome people, revealing both their brutality and their reverence for their warriors.